Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Indians program of geriatric psychiatry. Today we have with us Dr. Preeti Sinha, who is additional professor of psychiatry and consultant at geriatric psychiatry at NIMHANS. Today she'll be taking a session on evidence-based drug management in dementia. Welcome you, ma'am. So the stage is over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Chetan. So I welcome you all to the sixth session of geriatric psychiatry module. And as Dr. Chetan said, we would have a presentation about evidence-based drug management. So the outline of the presentation would be, we would first focus on the cognitive enhancers for Alzheimer's disease per se, which would be acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, talking about its various aspects, then memantine and some nutritional supplements, and then what should be our treatment approach for cognitive enhancements. Then we would look to the treatment for behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, primarily for which the pharmacotherapies are available: apathy, depression, agitation, psychosis, and sleep. Then we would have some discussion about ginkgo biloba as a cognitive enhancer and as a managing for BPSD, and then we would have briefly some presentation about the other dementias. So to begin with, just to give an idea that this will be mainly focusing on Alzheimer's disease. The reason is that the enhancers which are available works more for Alzheimer's disease, and it's the most common cause of dementia. A recent meta-analysis have with the pooled estimate for people above 60 years found the point prevalence of 4% and incidence almost 15.8 per thousand years, which collaborates to a large extent to the World Alzheimer report given in 2015 by ADI, where the global prevalence was 5.2% and the incidence was 17.3 per thousand years. Cognitive enhancers, the primarily we know that acetylcholine is an important neurochemical which is required for consolidation of memory. So cholinergic enhancers have been tried but not very much successful, including the muscarinic receptors agonist. Currently, there is a trial going phase 2 trial for nicotine transdermal patch for MCI. We'll see what the results come. So the mainly what things are available are cholinesterase inhibitors, which inhibits acetylcholinesterase. And so the acetylcholine is available for a long time and they don't get converted into choline and acetic acid. There are three primarily cholinesterase inhibitors present in the market, which are in use: donepezil, rivastigmine, and galantamine. We'll first start with donepezil. The formulations which are available in India are immediate release or disintegrating tablets, 5 milligram and 10 milligram. There is also oral solution available for it, 5 milligram per 5 ml, and a sustained release for 23 milligram. It's a reversible, non-competitive acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Is mainly acetylcholinesterase and reversible. It's primarily protein bound, and it is get metabolized with two cytochrome P450 enzymes, 2D6 and 3A4, leading to two active and two inactive metabolites and a half-life of 70 hours. So one dose is enough in a day. The adverse effects which are there in with all cholinesterase inhibitors, primarily with donepezil as well, are gastric side effects: nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, diarrhea, weight loss, and can be an important reason for stopping the drug by the patient. There is also a concern because of its cholinergic effect causing bradycardia, heart block, or QT prolongation. sometimes may lead to syncopal attack, so need to be careful and be informed to the patient. There's also a issue with donepezil in terms of causing insomnia or abnormal dreams and fatigue. So we need to make sure that it doesn't disturb the sleep pattern when given to the patient. It may cause headache or muscle cramps. Very rarely there are some reports of rhabdomyolysis kind of a syndrome and also NMS. But we need not be bothered, but to be aware of these things would make us to take an informed decision when such situation arises. So since they are being metabolized by cytochrome P450, so slow metabolizers of 2D6 can have high level with the hepatic impairment also. And if there are concurrent inhibitors of that, like sertraline or fluoxetine, the dose is you start with 5 milligram and at least wait for 4 to 6 weeks and then should go to 10 milligram, because you may not be able to understand how much is the effect if we move fast with the dose. And all, since considering is half-life, it takes some time to get stabilized. So to be in a hurry, less than that would not be useful for the patient. As far as its effects are there have been shown consistently with the studies that there is benefit in cognition as well as ADL and global status. Up to 1 year, there are studies and meta-analysis available. For 23 milligram, there are 2 RCTs available, one positive, one with negative results for cognition, but definitely they also lead to adverse effects. Reverse stigmin, there are 2 kinds of formulations available. One is oral capsule as 1.5 milligram, 3 milligram, and 6 milligram. There is also a transdermal patch available, which is useful for patients who have gastric side effects with cholinesterase inhibitors. Comes in 4.6, 9.5, and 13.3 milligram. They are pseudo irreversible inhibitor combined acetylcholinesterase and butyrylcholinesterase. So though their half-life is small, is less 1.5, the clinical effects last for 10 hours because they pseudo irreversibly inhibit. So it gets free the acetylcholinesterase after a long time. It's less protein bound and this generally gets processed independent of cytochrome P450. So if the drug interaction is an issue, rivastigmine is a better option than the donepezil. Adverse effects are same. Gastric adverse effects are quite significant with rivastigmine. Then the cholinergic heart-related effects, insomnia, headache, and also tremor sometimes. The allergic reactions have happened with both formulations, but especially with transdermal patch. And there may have a chance of having even Stevens-Johnson syndrome due to hypersensitivity reaction. So need to be careful about it. Levels may increase with smokers because of their inhibitors, their severe renal impairment. They may decrease with moderate renal impairment and liver. There is in 2015 Cochrane database systematic review meta-analysis showing for 3450 patients. Here also we have the cognition, there is a mild improvement. In all of them, the improvement with MMSE is about 1.2 points, and with ADAS-Cog is a bit more than that, considering its scoring. And they have a global improvement and in ADL, but not so in the behavioral aspects. Here we need to start it with the 1.5 milligram twice daily, considering its half-life, actual half-life. And after 2 weeks, at least after 2 weeks, we can increase it to 3 milligram twice daily and then 4.5. And the maximum dose which we can be built up is 6 milligram, but we can always stop in between, and based on the tolerance and need of effects, this is the earliest we can go up to 12 milligram, 6 milligram twice daily. If we are using transdermal patch, then at least 4 weeks we need to wait. 4.6 and 9.5 are used, and if we feel that improvement is going, we can also try 13.3 milligram. These are costly. Rivastigmine is costlier than the donepezil, and so if patient can tolerate donepezil and no need of patch, maybe it can be tried. Then the third option is galantamine. We don't have extended release or solution available. It's available in 4 milligram and 8 milligram. It's a reversible competitive inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase and modulator of nicotine receptor. It's a low protein bound, half-life 7 hours, and gets hepatic metabolized as donepezil. The effects are same. It can also have the report of hypersensitive reaction is there with galantamine as well. Levels again will increase with CP2, D6 slow metabolizers and hepatic and renal impairment. Here again, we should wait for 4 to 6 weeks, start with 4 milligram, and we can go up to 12 milligram twice daily. But what has been seen in galantamine studies are that where they were wait for a longer duration, there was effect in ADL as well, and initially may not have an effect on ADL compared to the other cognitive enhancers. So now if we see that how do they place with each other, then the cognition benefits are definitely there, almost modest level, not a very major level of improvement in cognition. There was a recent meta-analysis of 80 trials where it was used as a class and across multiple forms of dementia. And they found that it helped in improvement in all except FTD, frontotemporal dementia, and there was about 1 to 1.1 MMSE improvement at 3, 6, and 12 months. In rare dementia also, there is a meta-analysis where there was some improvement in some selective cognitive function in Huntington disease, multiple sclerosis, and CADASIL cerebral autosomal dominant arteriopathy, and autonomic the CADASIL, and it doesn't have any effect on ADL and quality of life in these dementias. So if we want to start the therapy, when should we start? So for that, what has been seeing is that it can be started in all stages of AD and may be helpful for that. But as far as mild cognitive impairment is concerned, none of the guidelines recommend cholinesterase inhibitors in mild cognitive impairment, though in terms of practice which is being there, people do prescribe it. Considering its adverse effects, we should have a detailed discussion with the patients and then take a call whether it would be really helpful, considering an improvement in functioning is required. Disease modifying effect is not there found convincingly, and there are conflicting results in meta-analysis. In terms of tolerability, gastric adverse effects have been found up to 23% more with the higher dose. And there is not much correlation with the ApoE status being seen in terms of that whether ApoE4 positive or negative have more improvement with cholinesterase inhibitors. If we go for the duration of therapy, so benefits have been shown up to 3 to 5 years with various medications, especially galantamine and rivastigmine, that they have improved up to 5 years. There were 2 trials which were done in about last decade in moderate to severe and mild to moderate AD to see whether there is a need of continuing cholinesterase inhibitors and what happens if we stop it. These trials had their own issues in terms of able to recruit patients, but they didn't show very convincingly that after first year in the first one, which is a moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease, that there was a difference if the patient was continued on placebo or uh, donepezil in terms of nursing home placement. Whereas in the another one which was on mild to moderate, there was an improvement in cognition and functioning over next 2 years. However, in terms of institutionalization and improvement or progression in disability was not different. So it also depends upon the trials, the methods which they had used in the earlier one, and they also find it difficult to continue patients, and there were mortality associated for up to 3 to 5 years. So we are not very sure that actually what happens if we take these patients in the real scenario. There are uh, another few trials which have been done by withdrawal prevention strategy, and they found that cognitive scores deteriorate when they switch from active drug to placebo. The earlier one were not for, they were for finding the long-term safety and improvement. So these were mostly as a post-hoc analysis, whereas these are where they actually discontinued and see whether it helps or not. So when the discontinued studies which are done particularly for that, they have shown there is some improvement, some deterioration in cognition if they have discontinued. And though there was also a higher rate of study withdrawal also in the continued groups because of the adverse effects. The one study which was done for donepezil, RCT, which was done for moderate to severe, they didn't find any improvement in deterioration in global worsening at 8 weeks, but 8 weeks may be a shorter time, and also the number of patients was very less. If we compared each of them with each among themselves, so overall there is not much of a difference whether in donepezil and oral rivastigmine in moderate to moderate severe Alzheimer's disease. Rivastigmine was a bit better in retaining or improving ADL and global function, but also rivastigmine had a higher rate of adverse effects and significant withdrawal from the study during titration phase. So adverse effects was a problem with rivastigmine. This was an oral one, not for the transdermal. When the donepezil and galantamine was compared with each other, then the donepezil had a higher satisfaction and more improvement with donepezil than with the galantamine. But there are many, these studies are too less in number to say with recommended one is better than other. But definitely if you see that one, the patient is not responding to one cognitive cholinesterase inhibitors, the other one can be tried, or if it's not tolerating. And since they are overall same, so probably the faster titration may be successful, which have been tried in some studies, very small size studies, to see whether there is a withdrawal or some issues in terms of adverse effects or exacerbation of cognitive deficits. So now if we go to memantine, memantine is available in 5 and 10 milligram. It's non-competitive NMDA antagonist. It's almost 50% excreted unchanged, 45% protein bound. Rest of them get hepatic metabolized. Half-life is very long, as was in donepezil, 60 to 80 hours. So once a day should be enough. Generally, it's well tolerated. The best part of memantine is that the adverse effects are generally not an issue, though there is a chance of having hypotension or constipation, diarrhea. In Canada, they ask for periodic eye exams due to worsening of corneal disease. The discontinuation rates was almost similar to placebo, so the adverse effect was not a problem. The usual one can be dizziness or headache, with memantine more common than the other issues. Levels will increase in hepatic and renal impairment because of the metabolism. It was approved in 2003, whereas donepezil was approved in 96 and then 97, the other one. So we can start at 5 milligram. In 1 week, we can go, every week we can increase 5 milligram, and by 3 weeks, we should be able to reach the final dose of 10 milligram BD of memantine. In terms of its effects, recently there is a meta-analysis came for memantine with or without concomitant cholinesterase inhibitors, and with total of 3,700 participants. Though the benefit is small, but the certainty was quite high, and there was improvement in CGR also, and clinician interpreted scale also for function, and the cognitive functions also improved significantly, was rated with SIB. Overall, there was an improvement with memantine in moderate to severe AD. So it further strengthens what has been followed earlier also. So with this meta-analysis, which gives us confidence that memantine can be tried in moderate to severe AD. In mild AD, there was not much of the clinical benefit which was seen, though the evidence was a bit less certain, and discontinuation rates was quite high in mild AD. With cholinesterase inhibitors, there was not much of the difference in ADL or CGR. However, in the cognitive function, there was a larger in the lower effect, but in the behavior and mood, there was a larger improvement with combination of memantine and cholinesterase inhibitor in moderate to severe AD. So for behavioral problems, if we combine it, maybe it's a good idea. But as we see in later on with BPSD, this doesn't go well, which have been done only for BPSD, the meta-analysis. We'll have a further discussion about it with that. Memantine in vascular dementia also, there are some studies. There have been some improvement in cognitive function and behavior and mood, but not in clinical global response and ADL. In other dementias, the improvement is very less, especially in FTD and others. But in Parkinson disease dementia and dementia with Lewy body, there have been small benefit noted. So there have been specifically analysis which have been done for to see the combination of memantine and acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. There they haven't found any specific cognitive benefit, and though there was benefit in NPI as a secondary outcome measure, as we saw earlier, that the mood symptoms improve, behavior and mood symptoms improve, and caregiver perceived benefit, and there were less withdrawal of the patients from the study. There is another RCT which was done, reported in 2004. There they found that there was improvement in cognition as well as in global impression, ADL, and behavioral symptoms. So overall, we can say, as there are also some further meta-analysis which have been done for cognitive enhancers, and more or less what is being said is that in moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease, there have been an improvement in at least in global functions. In cognition, that's not much of the improvement, which can be also because of the severity of cognitive deficits, but behavioral symptoms improve, and the effects go down when we include the patients with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. But there is also one negative. Overall, again, it points the same thing. So I have put this to say that overall, there are many ways the analysis have been done with different inclusion and exclusion criteria. But the practice, what can be recommended is that in moderate to severe, we can start with anti-cholinesterase inhibitors, acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, and later on we can definitely add memantine. or can be given only memantine if cholesterol inhibitors cannot be given because of lack of response or a lot of adverse effects which are intolerable to the patient. In mild AD, starting memantine may not be a very good idea, or there are many meta-analyses which says it strongly. So that point may be the take-home point for the memantine we can consider. There are other cognitive enhancers also, like medium chain triglycerides and phospholipids. Again, the evidence is weak. Even for vitamin D, there was a RCT which was done, but again, it was for males and it was in a veteran population. There was lesser decline, but overall, no improvement was seen in a meta-analysis. Also, there was a concern that the daily allowance, the recommended dose was much more than what is recommended in general for vitamin E. So possible risk of stroke and other mortality is there with high dose of vitamin E. PUFA and DHA has also been tried, but the benefit have not been seen. There was a benefit seen in subgroup where ApoE4 negative patients were there. So considering that there is a currently ongoing phase 2 trial with a different kind of delivery of DHA and on different ApoE genotypes. So we'll see whether it gives us a better idea of use of PUFA in specifically patients. The other cognitive enhancers haven't shown any specific association with any of the ApoE genotypes. So how can we approach is that in mild cognitive impairment, we can start acetylcholine, but in selected patients should be very clear that what would be the purpose and what are the expected adverse effects. In mild Alzheimer's disease, we can be more confident, start with oral unless and until there are contraindications or difficulty. If there is no response or adverse effects, we can try the second one, especially the rivastigmine patch. In moderate, we can continue acetylcholine, dose can be increased to 23 if they tolerate. We can start memantine. We should continue these things until the stage of palliative care, or there are concerns of adverse effects. So now the BPSD medications, the things which are there for BPSD are, although there are symptoms like anxiety, motor behavior, wandering, disinhibited behavior, or appetite disturbance, we will not focus on them because generally the medication trials have been on these 5 which are on the left hand side, and we'll go to them one by one. But before starting, I would like to make it very clear that the non-pharmacological treatment is primary treatment in behavioral and psychological symptoms in dementia across the guidelines till date also. And we should be able to first understand, describe the problem, investigate the reasons, severity, make a plan for a psychological intervention, and then see whether the strategy is good or not, how to change. And medications only can be an adjuvant, and that also when we feel that non-pharmacological treatment is insufficient. So they should not be the first line medications for a long time. So let's start with apathy. Apathy, the medications which have been tried, and across the medications, all of them have very limited evidence. So that we need to take care. And the one which we can start apathy, which looks in terms of differential diagnosis, is a depression. The antidepressants, the mainly tried ones are citalopram, fluvoxamine, and trazodone. Unfortunately, none of them have targeted apathy as a primary outcome, and there have not been seen any statistically significant improvement on the secondary analysis. Cholesterol inhibitors have shown to, in some post-hoc analysis, improvement in apathy, but that there the multiple comparison correction was not done, or they were open label. So we can try, but we should not expect a lot with that. One of the important medications which have been tried is methylphenidate. I'm sorry for the spelling mistake for methylphenidate. The first trial, which was ADMET, where the primary scale was apathy evaluation scale, there was no improvement in that, but the secondary scales which were used, ADCS clinician guided scale and the NPI subscale of apathy, there they found significant improvement. Though there were significant weight adverse effects also because of high dose of methylphenidate, weight loss, anxiety, insomnia, which we know it happens with methylphenidate. So based on that, there is a larger phase 3 trial have been conducted, ADMET 2, and there they have made some difference. One is that they have changed the outcome, the one where the secondary scales, they have made them the primary, and they also have developed focused on diagnostic criteria for apathy as an important scale. And recently about verification of the validity of this in dementia patients have come, and we should expect soon the results of ADMET to be published. The other medications which have been tried in apathy are memantine, bupropion, modafinil. None of them have shown any improvement. So again, there is nothing specific to target, but we can have cognitive enhancers or there, and probably since they are already there and the measurement is a problem in apathy scale, maybe we can expect that still we can try these medications, and but as such there is no specific medication which we can give to the patient with confidence that it would help in apathy. For depression, unlike the expectation, there was a meta-analysis done for 7 trials where 3 was for sertraline. The response rate or remission rate was inconclusive. And though the scales are also, the sample size have small and not been done properly, there were 2 studies which were done on sertraline, especially in 2010 and 11. They were published. The one of them which was only on DIADS2, it was related to Alzheimer's disease related depression particularly. There was no change with sertraline, whereas the other one found a bit difference in 13 weeks, but not at 39 weeks. So whether we should give antidepressants to depression as a BPSD in dementia is doubtful. Then if you go to agitation, the antipsychotics have been tried, and they have been tried. We know about the black box warning of cardiovascular events and mortality. They are about up to 3.5% in high dose and 2% in low dose, and which is like double of the placebo in a meta-analysis which was done. And they can also lead to increased risk of hip fracture along with EPS and sedation issues. Atypical antipsychotics, standardized mean difference pool was 0.2, which is very small effect size at 6 to 12 weeks of follow-up. And when agitation and psychosis was combined, risperidone was the best one among them, and quetiapine didn't have any significant effect on agitation. KTAD, which has done for was primarily for other mental disorders, have done for AD also. Their discontinuation rates was similar with placebo, but when efficacy only was noted, definitely risperidone and olanzapine had much more improvement in agitation than the placebo. However, there was a worsening of cognition up to 2.46 points or more, and because of discontinuation due to adverse effects, overall there was not much difference with placebo. So again, it says that continuing it for a long time, the antipsychotics may not be a very good idea in agitation in dementia. There recently, in last few years, there are 2 antipsychotics which have been looked into BPSD for dementia. One of them is bremiprexazole, which has been tried in agitation particularly. It has a partial agonist in 5-HT1A along with D2, D3, and antagonist in 5-HT2A, B and 1B2C. The 2 RCTs already have been done, and there they have found improvement in CMI, this agitation inventory of being used regularly for agitation with at 2 milligram per day, not with 1 milligram. And in the another study also where the 2 milligram was reached, in post-op, those patients improved. The side effects are not or seen of extrapyramidal symptoms. They had headache, dizziness, and somnolence. Considering that there are 2 ongoing trials, 3 trials ongoing right now. 2 of them are open label for 12 to 14 weeks, and another one is RCT on 407 patients. So we should get at least some good evidence result, whether it would come in favor of bremiprexazole or against it, we have to see. Some antidepressants have also been used in agitation, considering that there are considering that there are some possibility of agitation is there. The few RCTs which have been done are showed change with citalopram and sertraline, but not with trazodone, and their adverse effects were tolerable. There is a trial which was done with CIT-AD, citalopram up to 30 milligram. The benefits were good, but the 30 milligram dose was an issue. Currently, there is a trial going on for escitalopram in agitation up to 5 to 15 milligram, which is supposed to be completed in December 2021. Cognitive enhancers also have been used, but not much of the difference have been found, though there is evidence to some extent that they may help in delaying the emergence of agitation, as being seen as a secondary outcome in RCTs and open label trials. The other medications also have been seen, but not much of the use. Carbamazepine though have shown some results. So in compared to the other BPSD, we have more options in agitation than in apathy or depression. There is another trial going on with dextromethorphan and quinidine, where the phase 2 trial was a bit successful, but the cost is an important issue. Then pimavanserin and others. So there are almost 6 to 8 trials which are going on to see whether we can get some effective treatment for agitation. Now for psychosis, as we expect, that antipsychotics are used and their evidence is same. Risperidone is better than the other antipsychotics, and cholinesterase and memantine, again the same thing. The issue is that they are post hoc without multiple comparison correction. There was a antipsychotic discontinuation study done, very famous study in 2012, according to which there was relapse of psychotic symptoms when risperidone was tapered off at 16 weeks or before, from the first only, if it was not given. So the response rate was better compared to placebo, whether it was 16th week or 32nd week. However, there the discontinuation rates again was a problem. With 32 weeks it was 68%, with 16 weeks it was 29%, and where the open label it was about 38%. So as with the other, it all is the same thing, that we need to be very cautious about using an antipsychotics in BPSD. The practice guidelines, which was for APA, they say that we should start antipsychotics only after non-pharmacological treatment. And when we start, if we see no response, then by 4 weeks we should stop. And after 4 months, by the latest, we should start tapering off and see whether patient can be better even without antipsychotics or not. The newer antipsychotics, the one which have been tested in psychosis, is pimavanserin. There have been Parkinson-related psychosis and AD-related psychosis. Some improvement was seen in week 6. Now there is a phase 3 trial is going on. Again, relapse prevention, where the withdrawal is randomized after 12 weeks of treatment. and recruitment is over. We should be able to see the results soon. In sleep, and though the benzodiazepine and non-benzodiazepines are used in dementia, the kind of evidence is nil for both of them, and the others also have not shown very significant effects. The best one among them can be the trazodone, which has seen in up to 50 milligram per day some improvement in sleeping hours. Donepezil may be taken in morning and improve the sleep, and galantamine have been seen as a post hoc analysis to improve the sleep quality compared to the donepezil in general. So now we'll go a bit about ginkgo biloba. In last couple of years, there have been much more studies and analysis being done. And recently, it has come in 2020, which the major issue with the ginkgo biloba is that there are positive studies, but at the same time, there are negative studies as well. So this meta-analysis, what they try to see that, review try to see is that to find out what are the reasons for this. So what they found is that the long-term studies have more positive results, and mild to moderate dementia and above 60 years. There were studies below 60 years also. They haven't found good improvement with that. There was a clinical expert group consensus guidelines published in 2018, which according to which they consider extract of ginkgo biloba at 240 milligram per day to be used in AD, vascular dementia, mixed dementia, and they are comparable to acetylcholinesterase inhibitors and memantine, though other guidelines don't agree with them. There have been seen improvement in all the positive results is cognition, behavior, and ADL, and as well as in reducing caregiver burden. So they may be used, but with a understanding and analysis that in the later time to see whether it's actually helping or not. If not, then it's better to withdraw the medicine. In BPSD also, they have been shown to be improved in both AD, vascular dementia, and mixed dementia with fixed effect model meta-analysis. And the significant effect size were seen in a lot more each subschool of NPI, but they were not effective in psychotic symptoms, euphoria, and appetite disturbance. In vascular dementia, acetylcholinesterase have small beneficial effect on cognition, but global scale ADL or BPSD, they don't have much of the effect. Again, memantine also has small effects on cognition, but not on global measures. However, both are not approved for vascular dementia. For SSRIs, there have been studies and they have shown to improve depression rather than apathy. Other inconclusive medications for which there are not enough evidence but have been tried are calcium channel blockers, nootropic, methylphenidate, propinerol, or bromocriptine. For dementia with Lewy body or cognitive impairment in Parkinson disease or Parkinson disease with dementia, there was a recent review and meta-analysis. So they have shown improvement with acetylcholinesterase improvement in cognitive function, clinical global impression, BPSD, motor function. So DLB can be one of the another place where we can use, especially because antipsychotics is difficult to use secondary to the risk of extrapyramidal symptoms. And even the rivastigmine patch was helpful in dysphagia as well. Memantine have not been shown consistently for the improvement both in cognitive function and BPSD. Pimavanserin have been suggested for Parkinson disease psychosis. There have been some trials going on for disease modifying agent. Not yet any successful thing have been come for DLB. So cholinesterase inhibitor seems to be a good option for DLB across the severity of dementia. For FTD, there are very less number of clinical trials compared to Alzheimer's disease. Acetylcholinesterase have mostly the negative results. In some, there was a behavioral exacerbation also seen. In one open label trial of rivastigmine, there was very small amount of benefit which was there, and the sample size was also very small. Memantine have not shown any improvement. SSRIs also have some improvement in total score, but there are also negative studies present. Others have been seen as a case series or open label studies like selegiline or dextroamphetamine. For impulsive symptoms, again, topiramate, clozapine have been tried. Oxytocin have been trying, but the RCTs are negative for that. So in FTD, we don't have too many options, and we need to rely on the non-pharmacological management more than any other medication strategy. So from my side, these are the things. I am happy to take any comments, queries, or any suggestions.
Thank you for the presentation, ma'am. Before others start asking questions, last time we had a few questions on psychopharmacology when Dr. Thomas had presented. So one of the questions from Dr. Vidya was, do antidepressants worsen apathy in dementia?
So antidepressant, they don't worsen apathy, but their improvement is also very limited. And if I am allowed to share, I can. एक minute. Yeah, so there is not much improvement with antidepressants which have been tried, but none of them have seen any worsening. In vascular dementia also, the antidepressants have improved depression, but not apathy. In Alzheimer's disease, even improvement in depression is not very convincing with antidepressants.
From the participants, if there are any questions, you can type in the chat box. For those who are viewing through YouTube, you can also send us questions through the YouTube live chat.
I know it was a very exhaustive presentation, but I thought to give an idea of what kind of studies are available would help you to have a much more informed decision taking rather than thinking all are helpful or all are not helpful.
Dr.
The good
Faisal
part is,
he had asked about rivastigmine patch. We have given the link of MIMS.
okay. So since lockdown, few patients of ours are not able to procure rivastigmine patch. That's happening. I haven't inquired in last 2 months, but before that, couple of our patients were not able to get that. So I'm not so sure whether it has come again or not. Yeah, so there is one question about DLB and Parkinson disease, how to balance dopamine and agonist and antipsychotic. So that's what. So in dopamine, in DLB and Parkinson's disease, there are good evidence for acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, even for BPSD symptoms. So though we feel like we should start antipsychotics when we see psychotic symptoms, We can start with anticholinesterase inhibitors and pharmacological management. And when a person gets stabilized on dopamine agonist, and then we would see that whether we require antipsychotic or not. And recently, since pimavanserin has come, though it's not available in India, and there are other trials going on, so we assume that we would have a better option for psychotic symptoms in these disorders.
Nurul, you can unmute your mic and ask the question.
Yeah, so Nurul is asking whether what is the evidence for combination of donepezil and memantine, and can we use memantine in the even at mild stage? So what have been seen as far as in last 5 years, there are a lot of meta-analysis have come for all the uh, studies which have happened, which give more clarity about these things. And they say very clearly that memantine is not been seen to be helpful in mild stage. So definitely it adds to the cost burden for the people, patient, and the family, and may not be very helpful. And it happens that since there is not much of help, they may stop it when it can be actually helpful. So memantine should not be started in mild stage unless and until you feel that acetylcholinesterase cannot be given or it's not tolerable. So let's try and see whether memantine is helpful or not. In moderate to severe dementia, again, there's nothing, there are evidence to say that both they are much more helpful in behavioral symptoms rather than in cognition. There are evidence, but we have to remember that with each of these medications, that the effect size is small to medium, not even medium, they're modest effect size. So we should not expect a lot with them. But nonetheless, if the behavioral symptoms are problem, and the patient is already on donepezil, you have been following, now they have gone to moderate to severe stage, so there are enough evidence to suggest that we should add memantine.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, so for rivastigmine, what has been seen is that generally 6 to 12 milligram were more effective and the 9.5 milligram. Even for the oral dose, up to 4.5 milligram, 1 to 4.5 milligram, there were some benefits seen. But for the first dose of patch, that 4.5, there was not benefit noted as far as the meta-analysis is concerned. But we should always at least by especially if the patient is not tolerating whatever is the maximum tolerable dose, we can go. There is an evidence that even up to 3 to 6 milligram of rivastigmine, there were small significant improvement in cognition and ADL. But if they can go, we can go up. But if your patient is not able to tolerate and there is no effect, then there is a chance that 6 milligram may not be enough for the patient. Then we should try some other medication or the patch at 9.5 or 13.3 milligram per day. So one of the basic reason is also the withdrawal and discontinuation secondary to the adverse effects in rivastigmine. There are few things which are very clear. Non-pharmacological is the most important thing in BPSD. MCI, we should avoid starting any cognitive enhancer. Mild we should try to deal with only acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Memantine can be added in moderate to severe. All cognitive enhancers can help in delaying the onset of BPHD symptoms. So it should be continued. It should be explained to the patient. Antipsychotics are helpful in agitation and psychosis, but at the cost of adverse effects. We need to remember, so try to taper off as much as early as possible. Antidepressants have not been found to be very helpful except in some depression.
Sir, can you unmute the mic
Yeah,
and add on, sir?
yeah. So Dr. Matthew, as he said, that in DLB and Parkinson, we should rely on acetylcholinesterase inhibitor rather than antipsychotics. Dementia. So this is another point which we need to be remembering very carefully.
Matthew, sir, would you like to add anything? Can you please unmute the mic and
Nothing from me, Chetan and Preeti. Thanks.
thank you, sir. If there are no more questions, shall we end the session, ma'am?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think we can end.
Thank you everyone for participating in this interactive session. Thank you, Dr. Preeti ma'am, for presenting today in our Indians program. We thank the geriatry psychiatry team here at NIMHANS for making these presentations. We'll meet you next week, next Saturday, on one more presentation from geriatric psychiatry unit from NIMHANS. So all the videos are available not only from geriatric psychiatry, from other super specialties. They're available in our YouTube channel, NIMHANS Indians. So kindly subscribe to our channel and you can watch all the videos in the channel.
I also want to thank the telemedicine for involving geriatric psychiatric unit for the module, and Professor Matthew Varghese, head of the department, head of the geriatric psychiatric unit, to give me an opportunity to talk about such an important topic related to drug management in dementia. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We also like to thank Linux Laboratories Chennai for their academic grants through which we are running this program. Thank you, one and all. We'll be ending the session now. So meet you all.